Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Bullivant, and I work I'm the comms lead, for the Workplace Experience team. Special welcome to all of our special guests here today, our sponsors and supporters for Amplify, the members of the media, the board members, all the staff that are here, and everyone who's online. Please amplify this session through social media, through the Twitter account, Facebook, LinkedIn, or the Hub. And I'm very excited about this presentation. I'm lucky enough to work with Adam a little bit here at AMP, and I've seen some amazing speakers over the last couple of days. But the edge of immersion, which you're about to see with Adam, should be a very interesting ride. So strap yourselves in and get ready for a immersive experience. Adam and his team at Free State are world-renowned experience designers. And their belief is that the best way to reach inspired and really inspirational solutions to problems is through immersive multisensory experiences. You're just about to experience one of them. So strap yourselves in, and please welcome me to welcome Adam to the stage.
Right. Hello everybody. Can you hear me okay at the back? Right. Can I introduce, Richard Lacano, who is from sound branding agency Yond. So he's going to help me today make this a kind of bit more richer, immersive experience. So we're going to really try and walk the talk of experience in immersion. So, Rich, let's begin there, shall we? So, Free State is we are experience master planners. And what that means is that we are interested in how we use experiences to attract people, how we use them to involve people, and how we create a sense of belonging, right? Our background is really kind of rock and roll. You know, I did architecture, but what we were really interested in doing was confronting our audience. That's what we loved. Because what we're interested in doing is seeing those reactions, seeing those sensations. And actually, I love being held to account, because if you tell a lot of very angry people at Samsung that you're going to guarantee transaction, then you really need to be able to deliver upon that. Can we turn down the sound on this one, and we'll turn you up a bit, Rick? So, recently, Free State has merged with Hassel, the legendary design agency. And this is exciting because it's now supercharging what we do. We began working with brands, and brands need to attract, involve, and create a sense of belonging. But interestingly, so do city makers. And so we're using that thinking to look at how experiences, and immersive experiences, can transform cities. But I'm not going to really show you lots of our stuff, because that would be a bit dull. I'm going to show you some other things. I'm going to show you a story about a shaman. Right, could we take the stage lights down a bit, please? So a lot of people talk about experiences, and obviously that's in every brief and on every poster and in every film of the moment. But really, we haven't invented anything here. This is something we've been doing for 50,000 years. Now, there was an anthropologist, and this anthropologist in the 1950s went to Namibia, and he was there to look at the wall paintings, thinking almost like these caves, as if they were like a frescoed cathedral. But then he met the shaman of the village, and the shaman told him this story, which I'm going to try and tell you about. So he told them about the 9-year-old boys who were taken to the edge of the village. They were taken to the caves, the mountains at the edge of the village, a place they never normally went to, a place they were scared of. And at that point on the edge of the village, there was a small opening, and the children at dusk were taken into the cave. At first, they couldn't see anything. It was very black, very scary, very anxious. They held hands. And then, as their eyes became more accustomed to the dark, they saw, sitting in a circle, a group of people. They then sat with those people who began to murmur, who were making noises that were rhythmical, getting ever more loud, ever more busy. So firstly, there's this point of collision, disruption, fear, but then it's beginning to become very relevant. They're beginning to notice who these people are. They're beginning to recognize that that's their father, their uncle, their grandparents. Then the noise gets louder, the hum grows, the rhythm grows. The people in the circle are beginning to sing together. The children are singing with them. And at this point, the shaman comes into the middle of the circle and throws a little bit more fuel on the fire. And at that point, the children realize exactly who everybody is. They see their faces, they see their smiles, they see that they are in this together. The children are now singing alongside everybody, and they stand up. And at that point, this shaman then throws some more fuel in the fire. And then the shaman leaps into the middle, and with his staff, or her staff maybe, he draws a line between those children to the cave, making this connection between 30,000 years and today. And he throws more fuel on the fire. And at that point, we begin to see the lion, the ibis, the buffalo. We begin to see that this is a story that's been told from generation to generation constantly for 30,000 years. And at that point, the children would say that the shaman is transformed into that lion. And that is the moment they will never forget. That is the moment where they realize that they're part of this continuum. They realize that they are going to be telling this story to their children. And it passes on, and it goes on and on and on. Now, this narrative arc, I think, is critical to this. And what I wanted to show you was this. Hello. Is the idea that what the shaman told here is this narrative of 5 parts. And whether we're talking about Beowulf or Star Wars or The Wizard of Oz, it is the same narrative arc. It begins with collision, a point of disruption. Think about The Wizard of Oz, that's the tornado transforming Dorothy to Oz. Then curiosity. We can't keep on whacking people around the head with a wet fish. We need to then make it relevant to them. Then we need to show them what the cues are. We need to connect with them. We need to have other people doing it so they know the rules of engagement. And then that leads us to collaborate, that we want to get involved, we want to dive in. And ultimately, it leads to celebration, telling the story, sharing it, because you've had such a rich experience. You want to tell others, and you want them to join in this. Now, this is the model we use for everything we do, whether it's the smallest floor plate or the grandest piece of city. It begins with people, like those 9-year-olds, but not the demographic thing, there is data about that, but the psychographic. We're interested in their enthusiasms, their behaviors, their needs. Then the program, the story. Now, I think too often designers leap from understanding people, because they say we've done a little bit of research, and then they go, and now we're going to design you the building. Or if it's a technologist, the technologist will say, well, I know the answer. It's technology. It's a bit like my grandmother would say, that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Yeah? If you're asking people, if you ask a spoon designer what the answer is, they'll tell you more spoons. What we're saying here is understand that narrative experience, that journey, and then it allows you to use all of these elements, the humanware, the behavioral bits, the software, the content, the technology, and then lastly the hardware, the environment, the interiors. That's how it works. That's how it has always worked. And I found this nice quote from this poet that was talking about the idea, and I know it's terribly annoying when people do this and they show words and then also speak at the same time, but I'm going to do that too. That you never forget what people make you feel. And to be honest, we've been dining out on that all around the world for 15 years, whether we work with Samsung or Sony or AMP or MTV. That's the way we work, because we find that that's the very best way to attract and involve and create a sense of belonging. Now, let's bring this into the 20th century. Let's go to 1937. So,
Want to know a secret? Promise not to tell?
Walt Disney, in 1937, invented the storyboard. I wish I'd invented the storyboard. And the reason he did this was working on Snow White. He had this incredibly complicated team. He had people working on the foreground and the background. He had people who were the agents, people liaising with the cinemas, distribution, finance. And he needed to rally everybody around the story. So, at the beginning of every single meeting, he would show 5 images. They'd start off as sketches, and then they'd get more and more detailed as he went on. And he did that because ultimately he wanted to bring everybody together where the story was the most important thing, more important than every other element. Also, he was a master of understanding the importance of this narrative arc. I don't need to go through the way Snow White works, but I think you can imagine, this, the disruption, there's a beautiful young girl, she's going to be killed by a queen, then we get to know her a little bit more, then we get to know her 7 little friends, and then we're standing shoulder to shoulder with her where she evades. No, she doesn't. She gets killed. It couldn't be worse, but no, true love's kiss, a moment of transformation. It's this narrative journey that we see again and again and again. Now, then Walt did something rather wonderful. And I think what I'd like to do now, Rich, is if we could play Walt.
Part means a lot to me in that something will never be finished, something that I can keep developing, keep plussing and adding to. It's alive, it'll be a live, breathing thing that will need changes. A picture is a thing that once you wrap it up and turn it over to Technicolor, you're through. Snow White is a dead issue with me. The last picture I just finished, the one I just wrapped up a few weeks ago, it's gone. I can't touch it. There's things in it I don't like, I can't do anything about it. I wanted something live, something that could grow, something I could keep plussing with ideas. You see? The park is that. Not only can I add things, but even the trees will keep growing. The thing will get more beautiful every year. And as I find out what the public like, when a picture's finished and I put it out, I find out what they like or they don't like, I have to apply that to some other thing. I can't change that picture. So that's why I wanted that park.
So Walt was clearly a master of immersion, immersive experiences. And what he did, he understood, we've looked at the film, but then in 1957, he took that narrative principle and designed his first theme park. And I think it has the same basic philosophy, in that here on the freeway is like a Toy Town station. This Toy Town station is incredibly odd to find on a freeway. How disruptive, what an interesting beginning. Then you go through the station and you find yourself on Main Street, USA. Something very familiar. It looks just like 1950s America, you're thinking. I was expecting something extraordinary. But then, what the fuck? There's a Bavarian castle. There's a Bavarian castle at the end of Main Street. What? So you have to go to the very center. Walt has got you in the center of his lobster pot. You are now connecting. You are now going to collaborate and explore around Futureland and Pirates of the Caribbean and Adventureland. This is the same narrative journey, and essentially what he's doing is he's using the storyboard, and he's storyboarded everything. He's using the story to then arrange all the elements of place. So the way the actors, the way the hosts work, the way the spaces work, the architecture works, the way the light and sound and animatronics work. Every single element is based on the narrative journey. And as a result, it was incredibly successful. Attendance rising, revenue rising, loyalty rising, and Disney essentially have used that same diagram in all of their parks ever since. And I think it's also interesting that that same diagram is the way things like, I don't know if you've been to the Wynn Casino Resort, it's based on the same principle, the same lobster pot diagram, because that's the very best way to persuade and influence people. And it might sound evil, but I think what we love about this is almost a phrase which is Steve Wynn's phrase, no tail, no sail, which I love. Right, now, Let's bring this up to date.
Greatness is not this wonderful, esoteric, elusive, godlike feature. You know, it's something that truly exists in all of us. This is what I believe, and I'm willing to die for it.
So, brands really understand immersive communication. So we've looked at the shaman, we've looked at the way that connects. We've looked at Walt and the way it's used in the world of entertainment and resorts and theme parks and films. Brands, and you know, a lot of our background is working with brands, understand that brilliantly. And I wanted to show you an example. I was judging at Cannes at the Lions 2 years ago, and this for me was the standout project. And I want to show you a little film which is all about, I suppose, the power of immersion and immersive storytelling to connect with your audience. So let's have a look at this.
If you were a kid in the 80s or 90s, there was only one thing you wanted to be when you grew up.
Michael Jordan! Michael Jordan!
Back then, Jordan and his iconic shoes were known for raising the bar for greatness in the paint, beyond the arc, and high above the rim. But an entire generation has grown up since MJ retired.
I wasn't even born yet. I wasn't born yet.
I wasn't even alive.
And know the brand for its fashion off the court rather than its performance on it. To celebrate the brand's 30th anniversary, we set up shop at NBA's biggest weekend.
Over the top.
And transformed New York's Penn Pavilion into an interactive museum where fans could follow the footsteps of the man behind the brand and relive the moments that changed the sport forever. The Last Shot. An immersive half-court designed to transport visitors back to MJ's greatest moments. Complete with 10 million LEDs beaming era-specific courts, as well as detailed step-by-step moves. The walls came to life with 8,000 individual fans, meticulously styled each decade that reacted to your every move. So when fans stepped into the brand's latest performance shoes, they stepped into a virtual time machine and interactive game, where they recreated the 1982 NCAA championship winner.
Michael Jordan!
Jordan's iconic 1998 shot when he won his 6th and final ring. Behind the scenes, 5 on-court cameras and editors captured every moment, instantly delivering 1,500 personalized shareable highlight reels. Inspiring the future of the game by celebrating the moments that defined it and continuing the brand's legacy of raising the bar for greatness.
I think it's a cracking project. And I think, you know, remember the narrative art we're talking about? I think the way it draws you in, the way that exhibition builds your curiosity, the way you can then watch other people doing it and watch the films. And I love the way, the details of the way, you know, you have people dressed in 80s and 90s gear, and then you can do it yourself and share those highlights. It's a cracking narrative journey. And I think if we look at it in terms of our model, you can see that that understanding of who that audience is, connecting with them, how that story is then activating all of these elements of place. I think it's fantastically sophisticated, but all of these elements are in service of the story. None of them is dominant, more dominant than any other one. The story is the highlight. Now, let's keep with this. So I wanted to just, I suppose, note that sometimes I put text slides up in case I forget what I'm saying. Also, I was in a workshop today and I actually started crying because I'm very jet lagged. So, so this is why I sort of put that up there, just to remind myself. Right, excellent. So that's what we do. These are our references. I think what I find fascinating about this is then what one might do for cities. So just imagine, you know, this thing's called the edge of immersion. What if we did it for cities? Now, interestingly, King's Cross, very near where we live, is exactly that. What they've done, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is every single element, the visual, the verbal, the conversational, the hosting, the technological, the architectural, the environmental, the sensorial, the interiors, the landscape, everything is based on a central story. The developer, a guy called Roger Madeline, had 360 meetings in the first year. He was out there meeting his audience. He was out there trying to work out what would connect with them. And then they wrote a wonderful, wonderful little book called Principles of a Human City in 2001. And that book wasn't about the architecture, the landscape, or the technology. It was about all the things that these wonderful people would do there, yeah? It was about the actions that they wanted to inspire. And so essentially, the way they spoke about it was in terms of narrative journeys, in the way that they would draw people in with events and activities and exhibitions. They were creating these places, these destinations, before there were any buildings finished. They were building it. The whole meanwhile use element was that they were actually almost creating a place before there was a place there. And they were using the experience to build that. It's almost like they were building the experience before the environment as something to inspire the environment that then would follow. And it's been fantastically successful. And there's miserable places like Paddington Basin or elements of Canary Wharf, or things that were sort of built at the same time where people don't want to spend their time there. They're not attracted there. King's Cross, I think, and this is again, I suppose, one of the things where I had some results slide here. But essentially all I wanted to tell you is whether it's value per square foot, whether it's about the numbers of people that come, the diversity of people that come, whether it's judged by net promoter scores or the amount of money made. People are buying into it because they're buying into the experience. And I suppose in everything we're doing with Hassel, that's what we're interested in, the idea of experience as the foundation of future cities. And clearly, I'm a crazy evangelist, and I've been drinking the Kool-Aid for way too long. But essentially, I think that all disciplines, all jobs, should be based on thinking about the experience first. Because ultimately, if we design virtuous, attractive, involving experience in the world of work, we're far more likely to create them for our customers, our students, our passengers, or whatever field you're in. So that's what I think. But clearly, I think I might be very wrong. Because there's a place in Korea that is called Songdo. I don't know if you've ever been to Songdo. So Songdo is a $40 billion city in a box. Basically, this city you could replicate anywhere. These designers, these architects, are incredibly excited about infrastructure, but they don't seem to think very much about people. Now let me show you a film. Bearing in mind, this is a big city and has nothing to do with experience, I would argue.
So what do you build when you're starting from scratch? Songdo's creators promise a truly green city with 40% parkland, total broadband coverage and sensors to monitor traffic and the environment. But the American firm behind the development says the city has also learned from the past.
We took an approach that has the best elements of some of the finest cities in the world.
We have a performing arts center that's situated on the water out on a point, just like the Sydney Opera House. The idea was to make something iconic like that. We have a central park with high-rise buildings surrounding and ringing that central park, just like New York Central Park. And lastly, we have a canal within our central park that's somewhat similar to Venice's canal system, even with a water taxi system that rides, that you can take a boat and ride on down through our canal.
The cityscape might be ambitious, but some of the most impressive architecture lies underground. One of the things you notice about Songdo is that there are no rubbish trucks. Instead, all household waste is sucked from individual kitchens through a vast network of underground pipes to processing centres like this one. Once here, it's automatically sorted and processed to be kinder to the environment. Not everything is easier here. Transport links into Seoul aren't as quick or simple as they seem on paper, and Songdo doesn't yet have the diverse creativity of South Korea's capital city. But the country's smart city pioneers aren't giving up yet.
So, it's interesting, isn't it? There's a city, and I'm not against the whole idea of smart cities. I think what's powerful about this, though, is it's almost like a modernist dream, isn't it? It's the idea, like Corbusier spoke about in 1925, about the idea that people would march with purpose. They're going, I'm in my home, in my tower, and now I'm going to march to work, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to very methodically going to go to the park, or I'm making a ride on down in the sort of canal. And actually, it doesn't allow for any sort of serendipity. It's all about the infrastructure. It's all about how we can process people in a way that's most efficient, most effective. There's nothing expressive, there's nothing joyful allowed in this incredibly elitist, top-down, controlling environment. And so in that sense, it looks like a city, but interestingly, one of the things they always celebrate is the fact that the cars are managed so efficiently that the streets look almost empty. But of course, they look almost empty because nobody wants to be there. And so I would argue that we should build cities based on the ideal experience, and we should think about it in terms of all of these elements of place. And again, a slide of words, just in case I forget to speak. Essentially, I recommend this article to you in that it's talking about smart cities without having opportunity for spontaneity and flexibility, that they dine out on things like how efficiently the garbage can be handled without actually thinking about the human experience. Now, so let's imagine together we're going to build the city of the future. And so let's think about that a bit, Rich. Because what I wanted to give you is I wanted to give you a model, essentially, that could help us designing everything that we do, whether you're designing passenger experiences, customer experiences, employee experiences, whatever that might be. And so I suppose what I want to give you is a model for how we can insert that joy. Because I think this exciting thing about the edge of immersion is that actually the opportunity to create and inspire positive action is all around us. And so in this little film, what we were wondering is if we could almost have like an experience generator. So firstly, we'd be thinking about the people. We'd be understanding their psychographics. We'd be understanding their behaviors, their needs. And then we'd be wondering about the humanware, the behavior, the conversations. We'd be then having a think about the software, the content, the technology. And lastly, we'd be thinking about the hardware, the physical aspects of this. And we'd essentially be then thinking about all the very best examples from in and out of sector. And we'd start to storyboard these together to make the most extraordinary ideal experience as the foundation of a new city. You'd have opportunities for collision, for disruption, for curiosity, connecting, making it familiar, making it relevant, for connection, which is all about, encouraging people to collaborate, to take part, to meet each other, and then ultimately, once you've got them involved, opportunities to celebrate. And you'd be building all of your cities based on those principles. What an extraordinary and joyous thing that could be. And I think the shaman would be incredibly proud of us if we could do that a little bit more. Now, I think in your great experience city of Sydney, and particularly of Melbourne, I think, you do this kind of in abundance. But I think most places don't. Most places forget that. Most places leap to, I suppose, the ideal conclusion. They spend a huge amount of time talking about particularly technology. And in many ways, not that I'm against technology, but I think sometimes it's a massive distraction. I think we should wonder about the ideal experience, and then we can more easily, more judiciously choose the appropriate technology to that. So I suppose, in conclusion, what I am celebrating here, whether it's the work of the shaman or the work of Walt, or what happens in brand communications or in city making, the idea that if we focus on the ideal experience, really understanding the needs, motivations, behaviors of people, we could make the most extraordinary ideal environments that are designed to inspire positive action. That's what we're interested in. So, I actually don't have a final slide to remind me what to say. I think thank you would be enough. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. Just wondering if there were any questions. Adam and I don't seem to have a chair, so we'll talk.
I think we'll stand.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Okay, I'll kick off with a question. Oh, we do have one. Oh, Peter, yeah.
I've got the mic, so I have a question. So if we look at, how do we reverse engineer immersive experiences into old cities that need a bit of more experience, such as Milton Keynes or something like that? And how do we reverse engineer immersive experiences into old archaic companies, I don't know, like Acme, let's say, that also need a bit of immersion and a bit of experience to lift their game? And is it the culture that forms the experience, or is it the experience that forms the culture, or is that a bit of a chicken and egg question?
Yeah. So that's 3 good questions. Then I think so. The last one first. I think it is a virtuous circle. That I think, if you think about the experience, you are more. You change culture. You change behaviour, because experiences ultimately kind of inspire behaviour change. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is I think it's easier with old cities because you've got so much to kick against. I think it's so exciting, particularly in sort of medieval cities, which are already incredibly curious with their serpentinian kind of roots around them. That that's what we love. We love wondering about what's around the corner. Milton Keynes is a particularly kind of good example there, because obviously based on being a grid, there's so little opportunity for chance encounters. So that's where I think one needs to almost aggress the city and think about experience not so much as an overlay, but something that can cut holes through these places and start to also enjoy the fact, like designers spend a lot of time thinking about coherency and consistency. But interestingly, I don't think the humans want that. I think what the humans like, if you ever go to Las Vegas, we know this, is drama and diversity and delight. That's what we want. And I think that's what one needs to then bring to that story, I'd argue.
Okay, well, just carrying on from that too, Adam, I think one of the things that I thought of when looking at particularly that Korean city that you showed is the role that authenticity plays in deciding a unique, specific experience so it doesn't become generic, and where you think authenticity fits into that requirement of what you should be doing.
Well, I think architects spend a lot of time talking about a sense of place, and actually I think what we really need to talk about is a sense of relevance. And I think what Songdo doesn't have is it doesn't have that clear understanding of who their target audience is. So that's why it's brought in, it's sort of like that Grand Canal and things. It's tried to think, well, that's the best examples, and so I'm going to stick them together and sort of trust it works. Where in fact that's clearly wrong.
Well, yeah, that whole thing about faux makes it quite disingenuous, doesn't it? Yeah. So, and then what about relating that back to business? So, my experience in marketing over the years has been that people traditionally have thought of there's a big difference between consumer marketing versus business-to-business marketing, right?
Yep.
Whereas the newer thought now is that they're one and the same, because we all talk to people, and I'm interested in where your model fits into business to business, or in that new vision of where things are.
So our model is one that's really against silos. It's not about there's no company, there's no brand, there's no product, there's no service. There's just people having good or bad experiences. That's it. And so in that sense, like Airbnb has Do I mean Airbnb? Yeah. Has just won the Sliding Door Award for the best workplace in the world. And interestingly, they're brilliant at sort of storyboarding customer journeys, but now they storyboard their employee journeys. And so that every month, the whole workplace is changing round. It is as agile as their processes, and it is attuned, it is relevant to their, changing needs of their employees. So in that sense, they are walking that communication marketing talk within the workplace to inspire better experience thinking beyond the workplace.
Great. Okay. Any other questions?
Hey, Adam. We're a big investor in airports, so just wondered, any thoughts on designing airports and experiences there?
Yeah. I think, apart from motorway service stations, I think airports are the shittest experience in the world. And I don't care how many people tell me that Changi is good, because clearly it's not. It's a sort of miserable kind of shopping fest monster. You know, it's just going, you will consume. You only exist to consume. Whereas Munich Airport, which is my favorite airport of the moment, has an area, a piazza that's been kind of opened up in the center where they program live experiences. So at the moment, there is a surf festival, right? Surf festival in Munich Airport. People are coming earlier to the airport to take in this, right? Meeters and greeters are staying beyond. Audi are now building an office there in the airport because people want to be there. So rather than airports being this sort of bastard child, that, you know, like in sort of Victorian times where you used to lock fourth children up in the base, you know, in the attic, airports potentially, in that whole, as you will remember, the aerotropolis kind of idea, is that actually I think experiences can be the things that can get airports out of the attic and back into the real world. But I think ultimately one needs to think about experience master planning it as the underlay rather than what always happens, it's the overlay. A lot of people mourn, like particularly designers go, my God, the Stansted Airport was so amazing. You know, wasn't Norman Foster extraordinary? What a shame it's been ruined by all the pubs and cafes. But the thing is, what the fuck? It was always going to be full. You know, if you're on Ryanair going to Dublin, you need a Guinness. You know, it was always going to be full of bars and cafes, and you've got to make that part of the story. So, yeah, I'm very interested in airports.
Well, and it's fair to say, well, you've also worked with Virgin Atlantic as well.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that experience, how you helped with that whole airport experience? Yeah.
So Virgin Atlantic is very tiny. You know, so British Airways is monstrous and is like over 300 planes. But Virgin Atlantic is only 40 planes. And so BA were building Terminal 5, which is, you know, amazing cathedral to aviation. Little Virgin Atlantic could never do anything like that. So they asked us to help them think about how the experience could be the great differentiator for them. And so we did this piece of work where we're really understanding their audience, which for the upper class thing is sort of high net worth individuals like you people. And what we realized that actually it was never going to be the lounge that was going to differentiate. Actually, the really anxious time is when you leave your home and you don't know when your flight is and you don't have your PA and it's like, oh my God, it's all going to go wrong. And so what we worked out was we'll send a chauffeur to them. They can check in at the door of the car. They greet you and say, hello, Jace, you've got plenty of time. And then they phone ahead and say, Jace is on his way. And then we designed this kind of ramp that was like a sort of James Bond baddies ramp where you can drive actually into the lounge and every, you know, it was a seamless experience, but actually, you know, we were using that thinking to just, you know, look at all those elements of place rather than doing some kind of grandiose statement. And, you know, it was incredibly useful to them. It allowed them to completely outwit their competitors. And ultimately, you could argue that they've been, you know, they're massively overvalued in their sale to Delta because they're so brilliant at experience innovation. Actually, that shouldn't be quoted, actually.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh, now you're going to make me cry again. I love London because, you know, I love the, you know, the constant kind of flux and kind of change of the place. But at the moment, obviously, that's hard to talk about. I think I've been really struck by Melbourne, the whole laneway thing, and the idea that there's local and independent, extraordinary places on every corner, which then makes me mourn London that's just full of, you know, pret-a-manger and kind of, ugh. So in that sense, you know, I really love, I think Melbourne is an extraordinary city. I mean, clearly, Sydney's good too.
Okay, yeah, another one down here.
From AMP.
Hello.
I'm curious about your thoughts around workplaces and to what extent immersive experiences have the potential to change how we see work and what we value as work itself.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think, you know, clearly this is we're working on that project with AMP and others at the moment, and I think one could argue, you know, developers spend a lot of time kind of, you know, thinking about, designing extraordinary towers, don't they? But actually, I don't know whether in the future, if we look at kind of some of the students I teach, they don't really want to be in kind of big, glamorous buildings. They want to be in kind of dirty, kind of exciting places. And, they don't necessarily want to have a structured day. They want to be making up as they go along. They want that lovely fluidity between, life and work. And so I suppose my answer to you is we need to create some extraordinary experiences to guarantee that we're going to attract and retain people, because it will be that I think will set workplaces apart. And in the same way that, particularly the world of almost like hospitality design has transformed workplace design, and, Hassel and gang have been brilliant at stuff like that. I think now it will be the experiences that will be the things that really connect with people. And I think one thing we know for sure is if you look at co-working environments, it's actually not the fact that it looks like a kind of groovy boutique hotel. It's the fact that that person, knows who you are and says, hello, Kelly, nice to see you today. Well, you should meet Jace. He's going to, or there's yoga at 4 o'clock, or School of Life is on at 5 o'clock. It's all about the joy of that program that I think is the thing that people really connect with. And the environment needs to be subservient to that. So I think that's what work should be about.
I think, unfortunately, we're going to be running out of time now. But as you can tell, Adam likes to have a chat. And I'm sure that if you get hold of him on any of these social channels or through the Amplify channels, you'll be able to carry on. So Adam is working with AMP at the moment, so he may be around the office at different times too, in case you bump into him. So thank you very much, Adam.